I'm Robert, and usually when I give a talk, I think we need to establish some kind of connection, like you need to know who I am to trust me with what I'm going to tell you. So let's start with the first obvious thing. Yes, I know I'm balding, okay? No need to tell me, no Ninja Turtle jokes, no nothing. I also have a goatee to try and cover up for it, you know, the places where anything actually still grows. Some people say there's a similarity. I don't know. I'm just, dropping it. I come from Sweden and I live in Stockholm, and everything you heard about Stockholm is true. So it is the promised land. We love our flags. One thing though, when you go down to Europe and talk about it, people always like to bring up the first version of the euro coin, where we're sort of the genitals of Europe. Thank God we're not Finland, and don't even mention Russia. So I also like to be a bit pretentious when I give talks. It's like the title with the new frontier. It's a quote from JFK, and it's basically about dreams and hope and future and all that. And you can pretty much apply it to everything. And I think that's the way people see HTML5 now. It's the savior of the future of everything in many people's minds. So what does actually HTML5 mean to me? I mean, is it just a flash killer? Okay, let's work that one out. It's not a flash killer. Flash is going to be around. It's just a journalism thing for PR that there's no reason, just because there's something new, it has to kill the old. Things can coexist. Otherwise, we wouldn't have retirement homes, right? We would just kill off people. One part, and this is just the way I see it, and other people might see it another way. Sorry. One part of the term HTML5 for me is semantics, about having new HTML elements, try to give richer meaning to the content, and just basically describe what things are. It's also, and especially in a conference like this, it's about going crazy with APIs, looking on all the web applications and things we've been trying to build so far. How can we make it easier? How can we make it smoother? How can we just look at the things that trouble us every day and try and take that pain away? And I always have this one in my presentations, or almost always, and it's about progressive enhancements. It's about not, whining about web browsers not supporting enough today and then you just, dumb it down to the lowest level. I think you need to start somewhere, serve content to whatever mobile device, whatever, less competent web browser, and build on top of that. Just use feature detection, see what you can do, and just enhance the experience on from there. And talking about HTML5, I think video has been the poster child of HTML5, and it's fine, but it's sort of also, I kind of have a love-hate with this thing because I like having video elements in HTML5, but it's also all the talk about HTML5 have been about videos. So sort of, yeah, I have to cover it, but I want to move on, but the idea from the beginning is pretty simple. You have a video element, you just set a source attribute, and you include a file. It's just in the code, it's in the DOM, you can interact with it. Fantastic. You can also have controls, width, height, the normal thing. But then, of course, we come back to where we've always been with video. We have the codec wars things, different patents, and people trying to defend their territories and such. And, we have one side with the H.264 codec, which is licensed and evil. And then we have open codecs like Ogtheora for video. And if you want to use the video element and serve video, then you can just use different source element within. And if it doesn't support the first format, you'll just go on to the next format and so on to your fallback content. So this would work in most web browsers today. But at the same time, it's the web. It is being a democratic right. We don't want to exclude everyone. And since IE so far doesn't support the video element in any web browser, we can just keep on building with bulk code. So if it doesn't support any of the first two formats, we can use Flash to serve the video instead. And I don't have enough room here, but we could also check into plugins in the operating systems and hook into them and serve video, etc. And this is, for me, so far, where video sort of fails, because it's even more of a hassle to serve video with HTML5 than it is with Flash. And then it kind of loses the point. We also have script interaction with it, and that's the nice part about it. It's just there in the page. You can have just the regular properties for it, check if it's paused, if it has ended, regular methods like play and pause and such. There are only a few methods actually to trigger things with the video. You can check the type and loading and pause play. On the other hand, there's lots and lots of properties where you can check what's actually happening with it and then read out the properties and detecting it and kind of take action depending on the value of various properties. We also have a number of events for pretty much anything that can happen when you play a video. And it's getting a bit old now, but BBC did an interesting experiment with just having subtitles synced with video. We're just checking where you are in the video, and you can just overlay different subtitles and skip to sections and such. And also when you have the text there, it's just part of the web browser. You can select the text and copy it and exchange it, which is a good thing, because then it's just not in a closed-in Flash or Silverlight box. It's actually just part of the normal web experience that people expect. Also, talking about codecs, with the can play type, you can also check before you do anything or before you load a certain type if it supports that codec. And then, of course, you can always throw in a personal opinion, but that's just me. And then we have the canvas element, which is most likely poster child number 2 for HTML5. And basically it's about having a drawing. We choose the fill style again, and we can start drawing a path. It's sort of like resetting thing with using begin path. And the move to method here is basically about lifting the pen from the paper, so to speak, and just put it down at a certain point and start drawing there. And here you use line 2 to draw different lines, and you just fill it with the fill style color, which ends up in a triangle. And I know, I mean, these are cutting edge examples, so it's okay if you don't get it right away. We also have, well, move to and line 2, and we can combine it with drawing arcs and using math for different curves and such. And the result would be, going to MoMA in New York or something. And also, if you come from a designer world, you might be very used to Bezier curves, and you also have that possibility in Canvas to basically control every kind of drawing and arcing and curving and put it out. And it could be a bit tricky because, at least for me, once you think you got a hang of it and you just fill in the numbers and then you look at the actual result and it's not really what you expected. So you might need to complement it with Illustrator or something else just to learn actually how curves are being drawn to know what to expect. And using Bezier curves, you could, do something like that, have it arc over the end. Another thing, and this is probably just part of me being performance freak as well, and making things faster for the end user and cutting down on requests and such. And one nice thing about Canvas is you can just take a normal image, an image file, and here you just set the source for that image to a view JPEG file, and then you load it into the Canvas. And the nice thing there is when you have it in Canvas, you can start manipulating it any way you want to. So here, for instance, you can take that image file within the Canvas and just extract it as base64. So you can just have a code description of the image and make it possible for the user to download the image or, draw something on the page and download the resulting of the drawing and such. So using a toData URL method here would result in, some code. And, being a geek, the more code, the better, right? And, as usual, Internet Explorer doesn't support the Canvas element, and to be very proud Swedish here, a Swedish guy started developing the Explorer Canvas project which is basically about using VML, not the poor thing we have with WAP and things and cell phone, but vector markup language, which is what Microsoft has been using in Office products and Internet Explorer since way, way back to describe vectors. So what it did was looking at the Canvas code and just tried to present that in vector code for Microsoft as well. So what you can do with this library is you can just write Canvas code, insert this library, and it will just interpret your code and make it work in IE for you. You know, sheer magic. Not the most advanced things in Canvas, but you can, you know, get to a pretty decent level using this, and you can reach every kind of web browser then. And with Canvas, of course, there are people doing lots of nice things, like implementing Mario Kart with it. And if you have a laptop with an accelerometer, you can just, you know, turn the car by tilting it and such. There's also, well, fairly new, someone did the video blow-up thing with Canvas, which is basically you just click on the video and it takes different rectangles and just draws them out, and then they creep back into the video, and you can have small mini explosions. Some interesting code to look at, and also, you know, gaming. Just add some good graphics and some good interactions, and it's pretty nice. Another thing, especially since I guess everyone of you saw Ben and Dion, and a few years ago when they were working for Mozilla, and they started out with the Bespin project, which is a good example of using Canvas, just not for, you know, gaming and drawing, but where they implemented a well, fairly complete editor within the web browser using the Canvas element, which was really exciting, and also to see how fast they could make it with text handling and such. And now Bespin has been changing name to Skywriter, but for me it's always Bespin, you know, the true Star Wars name, and we need to respect that. On the other hand, we have SVG, which is scalable vector graphics. And the good thing about vectors, of course, you can scale them any way you want to. So just looking at some basic vector code here, you have an SVG element here, and that's normal. You set the dimensions and a version here, and then you draw a little circle. And you set the position of the circle, what kind of stroke color and fill color and such, and it will look like that. Fantastic. But you can also take the SVG code and break it out into its own file, and then you need to use the XML prologue here. And just specify that it's not going to be standalone. You're going to include it within the page. And then you can have the same SVG code and just, well, insert it into a page. You can also script all of that instead of having it in SVG code. And that basically means using the createElementNS method to create a new namespace for that element. And the same way, you set the different attributes and the position, and it would result in the same code we saw in the previous slide. Another option is using the Raphael JavaScript library, which is a very tricky invention, and sort of in line with Explorer Canvas before, that it uses SVG in those web browsers that support it, and it falls back to VML for Internet Explorer. And using Raphael, there's not that much code anymore. I'm not going to say any stupid code like jQuery for SVG or something, but you know, you get the drift. You cut out all of the headaches and just have the focus on the things you want to do. And where we are today with SVG is actually a pretty good place. If you serve a web page with a MIME type for XHTML or for XML, you can just have the SVG code inline because it's true XML. Otherwise, you can embed it in the page, like I mentioned, having the code in a separate file. So you can use the embed element or iframe or object element and just reference that file, and it'll be rendered there in the page. You can use the JavaScript approach, or you can use the Raphael approach to insert it. However, you can't use it in regular HTML pages because it's regarded as XML and it just won't be rendered. So where we're going tomorrow, of course, and where most web browsers are now, is having it just inline, just having it as normal HTML elements. You know, no matter if you're going to go with XML or not, you can just use it as regular code. And in the next version of Firefox and coming in Chrome and IE9, it's just going to work. I'm not really sure about Safari, because it might be that Apple don't tell everything they do. And I think it's going to happen in Opera, but it's not set yet. And after that, I don't really know, but I really think that SVG is going to be a huge part of the future of doing richer web pages. And then, of course, coming back to the, oh, is this a Flash killer thing? It's also about, oh, I want to use Canvas for everything because now I learned it, or I want to use SVG for everything. And, you know, it's always trying to pick a fight instead of just choosing what's suitable for what you want to do. So the thing is, you know, don't worry, they can coexist as well. We can just be friends about it. And the actual difference is that they do complement each other in a very good way. That, you know, Vector has its strength, and you can scale it and all that, whereas Canvas is just bitmaps and drawn pixels. So I think, from my experience, that SVG has been very good for different kinds of interactions and drawing shapes and maps and such, whereas Canvas it's very fast and you can do really nice and good animations with it. The upside, though, of using SVG is that you have actual DOM elements in the page, like you can attach events to a certain part of the vectors. In Canvas, it's just, you know, just a bunch of scribble on a paper. You can't really just extract a pixel and tell what's going to happen for that pixel. And, you know, if you're into SEO and being #1 on Google, the nice thing is that Google officially stated that they do index the content within the SVG code as well, which of course is a very, very good thing. And geolocation is one of those things that it's not part of the, well, one of the actual HTML5 specs, so it's sort of a sister spec. For me, it doesn't really matter. For me, it's more like there's a bunch of specs with new interesting things happening, and, you know, one day they might be in the official spec, one day it might be in a separate spec. You know, it's more about bringing hope and showing the new things than what spec it belongs to. And of course, with geolocation, the nice thing is just on the navigator object in the web browser, you can use a few methods, like get current position, and just get the latitude and longitude for where that user are. Of course, they have to approve that you find out where they are, at least for now, maybe not in 10 years. We'll see where the world goes. And if you go to Google Maps with a web browser that supports geolocation, you'll just get a little extra dot up there, and you click it, it will just find out where you are and mark it out on the map. And you can just build on that and use, well, some of the latest Google APIs to you know, you have directions in the Google Maps web page, but you can have it in your own as well, and just, you know, find out where the user is. Like if you build a web page for a company and, you know, find your way from where you are right now to the museum or whatever, you can easily find that out. And then we look at storage on the web, and so far it's been sort of limited. Like we've had cookies, and as you all might know, when you have cookies, you go crazy with cookies, and you get some kind of sugar overload, and you don't really think clearly. And to be honest, you know, where we are now, cookies suck. Cookies aren't that good for most things we want to do. I'm sure this boy has got proud parents. So what we want to do instead is using local and session storage. And session storage is basically about your web browsing session now. When you close your web browser, it's gone. So you have a session storage object with various methods like setItem and getItem here, and it'll just be stored there. And the good thing, of course, is that you have, depending on the web browser, but you usually have at least 5 megabytes of storage capacity, whereas you had about, what, 2, 3, 4 kilobytes with cookies. And with local storage, it's just the same thing, the same syntax, but the difference with local storage is that it'll be saved across sessions, you know, until the user clears the cache or similar approaches. And of course, it's just being text-based, so you want to save objects or something in a JSON format or similar. And the good thing about that, and especially with having Douglas in the room here today with bringing JSON to the world, or at least having getting attention to it, is that within web browsers now, I think most major web browsers, we have a native JSON object, and it has 2 very important methods. We have stringify and it has parse. And the first line here with setting the item here is just you take a JSON object and turn it into a string and save it into the storage. And when you want to read it out, you just parse it into an object again, and you can work with it like a normal object. And this, of course, makes the storing a lot richer. There's also two different paths of sort of richer storage than that on the web, and one has been the Web SQL and the other one IndexedDB. And it's not totally clear where it's going right now, but it seems like, well, Internet Explorer and Mozilla, at least, won't be doing the Web SQL thing. So at least I get the feeling that it's sort of ending, like it could be used for certain topics, but not all over. And it rather seems that IndexedDB is coming very strong in Firefox. I know that Microsoft has expressed interest in implementing it. I think Google are going there as well. So I would probably put my money on IndexedDB today. Tomorrow I might have a different opinion. But we also have post message, and it's more of a lightweight protocol. Oh, nice. So I'll do some quick things here. That's what you get for not being prepared. So I can address the situation. Fantastic. Get that one. Communicating between frames. So for instance, if you have an iframe in your content document, you can just reference that by id.contentWindow, and then you can post a message into that window. So the first part of the method post message here is, you know, what you want to send, and the other one is what domain are you sending it from. And receiving that within that iframe is a little bulk code at the end here, but just you have a onMessage event, and when you receive, or when the post message method is being called, you can check on the event object, you know, what was the origin of the message and what was the data of the message. You can make sure that it's from your domain or from an allowed domain, and take different actions depending on that. We also have web workers, and the thing about a web browser is that they're single-threaded. We can't really do things in parallel. So the good thing about web workers is that if we have some advanced code that's going to slow the interface down, like, you know, usually you get an alert box in the web browser saying that the web page is unresponsive and do you want to stop the script, etc. With web workers, you can sort of just push it out into its single thread and just keeps on working there, where the web page keeps on acting as normal. So it just starts by creating a worker object where you point to a worker.js file. And then, just as you saw with post message, you can post a message with a value into the worker.js file. And then you also have methods to receive when it calls back, when it has completed what it's going to do, like onMessage and if an error occurs. So if we look here, I send in just the number 5 here to the worker in the worker.js file. And in that file, they also have an onMessage event, and it gets the value in, like number 5, and just keeps on looping here. And for each iteration of the loop, it just posts the value back. So you can just see it counting up from 0 to 1,000,000 without hanging the web browser. Another thing, of course, is working offline, especially, you can say for my own sake, when you go to conferences and airports and all that, you just want to keep on doing what you want to do. And the good thing about offline web applications is that, first of all, as a web developer, you can detect if the user is online. And it sort of works. And to give credit, Internet Explorer works the best here, because in IE, well, for one thing, you can use work offline in the menu, but you can also just pull the Ethernet cable or turn off Wi-Fi and such, and it'll throw an event. I haven't seen any other web browser actually do that. You know, might do some polling and detect it later on, but not when it actually happens. So then you can know if the user is online. You can also, if you want to cover up with polling and check an online property of the navigator object, but polling isn't really nice, so if you can get around that, that's the best way. And the first step to make an application offline is to use a manifest attribute on the HTML element, where you just point to a manifest file that is going to describe what resources do you want to keep offline from this web page or website. And within that manifest, you first just declare that it is a manifest file, and there's a little caching thing, so when you update it, you want to include a comment with a version number or something just to sort of push out a new version. Otherwise, the web browser won't check for a later version of that file. And below the cache attribute here, you specify which files do you want to keep offline. And if you don't have connectivity, do you want fallback files? Like, for instance, you have the online CSS if it works, and the offline could be offline CSS here. You can also declare with the network here that some paths or some pages you have to be online. Like if you're not online, you can't access them. So then the user will be notified about that. File API is also pretty interesting to be able to upload files and work with multiple files the way we always wanted to do it. And it starts with having a regular input element for a file. You know what it's like. You normally can't style them. You can't really detect so much with them. But now we have a multiple attribute for it that just declares that it will accept any number of files at the same time for uploading. And if we have that file element here, we just attach the onChange event, and it has a files property that you can iterate over, that these are all the files that you're trying to upload right now. And for each file, you can read out the name of the file, the size of the file, and the type. And to combine that, we also have drag and drop, and I'm not sure if anyone follows Peter Paul Koch's blogging about it, but he hates it with a strong, strong passion, and I can understand him. The thing with drag and drop is that something Microsoft did a long, long time ago, and it was sort of reverse engineered and then implemented in all web browsers. I'm not really sure where it goes right now, if it's going to stick around the way it is, so we'll try and complement it with new things. But looking at the code, you can just have a normal HTML element here. And for that element, you have a few events, like the drag enter, when you drag something over that thing, or actually when it enters that element, and when you're over that element, and then what you want to do when you actually drop something on it. And then you have, on the event object, you have data transfer, and you can, for instance, read out the files. So, a little too much code there, but just looking at the example before with the multiple file field, you can just attach all the drag and drop events, and from outside the web browser, you can drag it into that field, drop it, and just start the uploading. And just going through all the files there, you can just check the names, the bytes, etc. And it's also a good way to be able to block a certain type directly at the client, but still allow lots of other files. And if you look at something like Gmail and well, most Ajax-type applications where you update certain parts of the page, a big problem has been, of course, that you want to update the URL bar as well. And it has been working, updating, using a hash character and some values. And in some web browsers, no names, back and forward hasn't really been working. And then you try to go through an iframe to fake it and such. And that's where the history API steps in. And the idea there is basically just have on the history object in the web browser, you have a push state method. And the first part here is an object. You just push in, what's the address you want to use, what's the title of that, and what's the actual URL to navigate to. You can also use replace state. So instead of just going back and forth there, you can just, ignore what's there right now and replace it with a new state. And for me at least, one of the most exciting things, and it's going to grow enormously, is WebSockets. And with WebSockets in HTML5, where we had it before was with Ajax and doing some things, just polling and different. And then we tried to complement it by using Comet and having long polling to be able to push something from the server instead of just doing lookups to the server all the time. And there are also some cases we can use Flash to have the same kind of approach. And the idea for WebSockets is to just step up there. You create a WebSocket object, and then you have an open connection to the server, and you can just communicate whatever way you want to. You can push things to the server, but it can also be completely idle, and the server can push out content when you have anything new or an update to an article you're reading or similar. And when you have that WebSocket, as with most other names in the HTML5 APIs, you have the message event when it receives a message, when you open a connection, when you close the connection and such. It's very easy to track, it's very easy to code, and I really think it's going to be a revolution for pushing things instead of just doing damage to the server all the time. And where we are right now, a few web browsers have implemented it, and most seem to be going that way. There are a few JavaScript libraries like WebSocket.js and Socket.io, where you have, they first do detection for WebSocket support, and then it falls back with other parts just to make it work in every web browser. So you can start using it right away today. And talking about 3D concept before is about bringing three-dimensional things to the web. How do we code it directly into the web browser? No plugins and nothing. And Google has some interesting experiments, probably way more than these, which just shows how much you can do with WebGL and having different textures and perspectives and such, and quite interesting things. It does depend on the power of your computer, though, because it's a very good way to make the fan go crazy and to burn your knee. But we're getting there. At least we're getting the possibility to do it. There was also a porting of Quake a few months ago, and actually doing a Quake game. This approach. I'm not going to specifically mention my personal opinions about GWT, but if you can do Quake with it, that's fine. And I think the latest one that got a lot of attention was the Wilderness Downtown, which is basically a mix of most technologies I've been talking about today. They use some canvas, some SVG, some 3D canvas for the different rotating things. One thing that was a bit interesting, though, is that they pop up a lot of windows. So I know a system developer at work asked me, okay, so what's actually HTML5? Is it about synchronized windows, or what's the deal? But anyway, it is a very nice thing, and it's a perfect showcase of what you can do. You don't have to do it like that, but it's a possibility. And then when we talk about web browser support, of course, web browsers, the whole point of web browsers is to render web pages and to do their thing. That's their sole purpose in existence. And what we had before is if you have a sole purpose and you fail with it, there's not really any good way to go from there. But actually what's happening lately is that we're becoming happy beavers. And the good thing about that is that web browsers now, they're getting there, and if they're not there, they're getting there very fast. And that includes the company from Redmond as well. Looking at the things in IE9, compare IE9 to IE8, and it's a vast difference. IE9 has lots of nice things and lots of good hardware acceleration for Canvas and SVG and such. There are a few of these APIs that aren't supported there yet. They're still lagging a bit behind, but at least they're much, much closer than before. And it's really encouraging to see that they're putting the money and effort into that. And of course, I want you to use all these new APIs and go crazy. But when you go out in the real world, someone has to look at the things you code as well. So don't go overboard. Try to see, does this fit in? Is this okay, or is it too much? My slides will be available for download if I get a good connection later from that URL. It's sort of mandatory to follow me on Twitter. You don't have to like me. I just need followers, okay? Otherwise, all the other speakers just mock me, and it's not a nice thing. And, well, thank you for having me, and take care of each other.